What's up, Guardians, and welcome back, Titans. It feels like it's been a while since we last checked out a Titan build, but today we're back at it with a surprisingly powerful endgame prismatic build. Since the introduction of the Prismatic Subclass, the unwritten law of the road when it comes to playing Titan is that consecration is the only way.
It's the first rule in the book.
But today I'll be showing you how you can put together a top tier endgame Titan build without using consecration. This is one of the funnest and most unique prismatic builds that I've had the pleasure of using, and it's extremely powerful. It's an incredible option for deleting champions, bosses, tormentors, harbingers, omens, and any other type of mini-boss that you'll encounter, which means you'll find a ton of success out of this build when running lost sectors, legendary campaigns, even master and grandmaster level content. This is thanks to the amazing synergy that the Peregrine Greaves exotic boots have with the Prismatic Subclass. This has always been a strong exotic, but it's had poor synergy in terms of ability regeneration and its usefulness when used on a standard subclass. But with the Prismatic Subclass providing superior synergy through several energy types, abilities, aspects, and fragments, the Peregrine Greaves has finally found a proper home. This exotic comes with a Peregrine Strike Intrinsic Trait, which is going to pair up with the Hammer Strike or Shiver Strike melee options. This provides a massive increase in shoulder charge damage whenever performed mid-air. After sprinting for at least 2 seconds, you'll activate the Peregrine Strike buff whenever you go airborne. When the Peregrine Strike buff is active, your powered melee attacks will deal 225% increased impact damage. And when used on high-ranking enemies like champions, tormentors, and mini-bosses, these will deal 1000% bonus impact damage. Even against Grandmaster level champions, that's enough burst damage to completely wipe them off the board. In order to activate Hammer Strike or Shiver Strike, you would need to gain momentum, so the only added gameplay loop that you need to initiate here is hopping off the ground after you've gained that momentum. Using the strafe jump option will make it a lot easier to execute these, since you'll have more horizontal control. I do find it to be more beneficial in running the Hammer Strike option, because this will add Scorch, which can trigger ignitions, and the Peregrines will not increase our melee damage whenever used against frozen enemies. Shiver Strike freezes enemies after impact, but this could still limit the overall effectiveness in terms of consecutive Peregrine Strikes. What's even better about using this on high-ranking enemies is that we'll instantly have our melee energy recharged, allowing us to perform consecutive mid-air hammer strikes. And because of how we have the rest of our build set up, we'll have remarkable uptime of our melee abilities. We'll be able to add on even more bonus damage and give ourselves a ton of bonus resistance to keep us alive during the most brutal of onslaughts. And the first place we start is our choice in Super, and this is important for a couple of reasons. Because of our choices in fragments and artifact mods, we're going to be able to generate elemental pickups and have elemental buffs based on the energy of our super. And this leads us to going with either Twilight Arsenal or Glacial Quake. With Glacial Quake, we'll be able to generate stasis shards, which grant 10% bonus melee energy. There's also Frost Armor, which will provide us with as much as a 22% damage resistance bonus. The Peregrine Greaves also have some unique synergy with the Glacial Quake Super. We won't be able to deal bonus damage against frozen enemies, but Peregrine Greaves will activate for our Shiver Strike whenever we're in our Glacial Quake Super. It's a little more difficult to pull it off consecutively, but against the right enemy, this could really unleash a lot of burst damage. When using Twilight Arsenal, we'll have the benefits of a Void Overshield, which provides us with 50% bonus damage resistance. We also get a high damaging super that will make for a great combo move to use with the Hammer Strike. The downside is that Void Breaches provide us with class ability energy, so we wouldn't have quite the same level of melee regeneration whenever using Twilight Arsenal. So unless you're met with a major damage check, I would recommend using Glacial Quake. In terms of prismatic aspects, we're using a combination that will really benefit our use of the Peregrine. We're using Knockout with Drengr's Lash. Knockout is going to provide us with so many benefits. When we critically wound or defeat an enemy with any of our melee options, we'll trigger Knockout and will become amplified. Whenever Knockout is active, we'll gain a 100% increase to our base melee damage, These melees will start counting as powered melees, giving them the ability to generate orbs. And our actual powered melee will receive a 50% increase to their damage, which will stack right on top of the bonus damage that Peregrines will provide. Having Knockout active when we perform a Peregrine charged Hammer Strike is what really lets us tear through those bigger enemies, like champions and tormentors. And this is why Drengr's Lash plays such a pivotal role in this gameplay loop. To go with Drengr's Lash, we are using the Thruster's class ability. Barricades are great at doing what they're designed to do, but they can inadvertently create splash damage, and they also put a halt to any forward momentum that you might have already had. Which is why I find more benefit out of using thrusters, so that we can more easily activate the Peregrine Strike bonus while in stride. With Drengr's Lash, we'll create a detonating burst of strand energy that suspends up close targets. These suspensions will stun unstoppable and barrier champions, and once we have those enemies up in the air, we can easily activate that bonus Peregrine damage. But if we've trapped a bunch of rank and file enemies, we can make use of our knockout melee punches instead, giving us an easy source of health regeneration in the middle of combat, and allowing us to save our overcharged Hammer Strike for the beefier enemies. I also like using Drengr's Lash because it provides us with a defensive maneuver if we get overwhelmed. To double down on our ability to suspend enemies, I recommend using Shackle grenades, but there are some encounters where a Suppressor grenade can become more beneficial. It just depends on the layout of the activity and the race and density of the enemies. One of the greatest benefits of running the Peregrine Greaves with the Prismatic Subclass is that when Transcendency is active, we'll be able to continuously spam our Combo Grenade and our Hammer Strike. Our Combo Grenade is going to suspend enemies and shoot them all full of Jolt, and that's going to give us several opportunities to trigger that bonus and damage against the same enemy or several enemies. We'll talk about it more in depth here soon, but because of our artifact mods, we are going to be able to give our transcendent abilities a huge bonus in regeneration and damage, giving the opportunity for the Peregrine Greaves to shine like they've never done with any other subclass. When it comes to our fragment options, our goal is to play off the Peregrine Greaves and our Hammer Strike. Since we'll be up close and personal to enemies, we're using Facet of Protection. This grants us a 15% bonus in damage resistance whenever we're surrounded by enemies, but once we've activated our Transcendency, that will get extended to 32%. With the use of Facet of Courage, when we suspend enemies with our Drengr's Lash or Shackle Grenade, our light-based abilities will deal 10% bonus damage. This would increase the damage dealt from our Twilight Arsenal, our Hammer Strike, or Knockout-infused powered melee. It'll also increase the damage for elemental effects like Scorch, Ignitions, and Jolt. And because we are using the Facet of Dawn, when we strike enemies with our Knockout powered melee or our Hammer Strike, we'll trigger Radiance, giving all of our weapons a 25% increase in damage, with the added benefit of piercing barrier shields. That 25% bonus damage will become incredibly beneficial for beefier enemies, like Tier 3 Tormentors, which makes shotguns with 1-2 punch or trench barrel an amazing option to use as a follow-up on enemies after performing a Peregrine Strike. Since we are using the Radiant Orbs artifact mod, we will be able to trigger that Radiance just by collecting orbs, so between the two, we should have Radiance always active. To increase our energy regeneration, we're using the Facet of Awakening. This is going to cause elemental pickups to be created whenever rapidly defeating enemies with any of our light or darkness-based abilities. This means that with this particular setup, we'll be generating fire sprites, ionic traces, and either void breaches or stasis shards. Fire sprites will restore 12.5% grenade energy, while ionic traces provide between 12 and 15% energy for all three abilities. So between all the different elemental pickups, we'll be able to have rapid regeneration of not just our melee, but of all of our abilities. As I mentioned earlier, we'll be able to have a Void Overshield or Frost Armor active with this build, and that's going to be generated whenever we collect orbs thanks to the Facet of Purpose. We'll go over it more in detail here soon, but we're using multiple armor mods that are going to cause orbs to be generated, so as long as we're engaged in combat, we should be able to have that added protection. With our class tree options addressed, let's switch gears and talk about the artifact mods that we've got selected. With Elemental Siphon, we'll be able to generate additional stasis shards, or void breaches, based on which super that we're using. Whenever we use harmonic or kinetic weapons to rapidly defeat enemies, these elemental pickups will be generated, helping us regenerate our abilities even faster. We're also going to be able to get bonus ability energy out of the counter energy mod. This is only used when actual champions are present, but when they are present and they get stunned, you'll get a 25% surge in energy to the least charged ability. With use of the Galvanic Armor mod, it'll be much safer for us to perform mid-air hammer strikes, because when we are amplified, we'll have a 30% bonus in damage resistance. And this will get added on top of the bonus resistance that we're getting from Facet of Protection and our elemental buffs. Those elemental buffs are going to trigger bonus energy regeneration and bonus damage because of the Shield Crush artifact mod. Whenever we have Frost Armor or Avoid Overshield active, our melee energy will have a 25% increase in regeneration and a 25% increase in damage. And when we are Amplified or Radiant, we'll get the same deal applied to our grenades. And since we're going to have a mixture of all of these present, we're going to be able to deal some serious damage and have some insane ability regeneration going on at all times. The last artifact mod that we're using is the Transference mod, and this is going to boost the damage of our melee and our grenade abilities whenever Transcendency is active, stacking on an extra 10% bonus damage. And once Transcendency has ended, we'll gain bonus energy towards our next Transcendency. But that's going to be based on how many enemies were defeated with weapons while our Transcendence was active. So between our fragments, aspects, and artifact, we're getting some serious bonuses going towards survivability, ability use, and overall damage output, enhancing the Peregrine Greaves effectiveness more than ever, and we've still got our preferred weapon loadouts to talk about. Our choice in weaponry is going to be reliant on the activity, the available champions, and what modifiers are active. The most valuable exotic weapons right now are going to be the Conditional Finality, which will freeze and ignite enemies, a perfect complement to use after a Peregrine Strike. There's also the Risk Runner, or the Ergo Sum, with the Arc Conductor Intrinsic Trait. Both options grant an overshield that will help you get out of sticky situations, and both of these can be used against barrier champions, but the Ergo Sum can also be fitted to take on Overload champs. The Tractor Cannon is a great option to be able to stun Overload champions and debuff enemies by 30%. Debuffing an enemy with Tractor Cannon just before swooping in with a Peregrine Strike can be an especially lethal combination, even more so if you follow that up with 1-2 Punch or a Trench Barrel Shotgun. Another option to weaken enemies would be the Buried Bloodline, and this gives you the added benefit of Devour, granting us with a secondary source of health regeneration and bonus grenade energy. When it comes to legendary weapons, we would ideally want those that come with Pugilist or Grave Robber. This way we can play off of our increased melee use. Pugilist would provide bonus melee energy, while Grave Robber would automatically reload the weapon. Arc weapons with Volt Shot would create bonus ionic traces, helping us have all of our abilities back much faster. This would also improve our effectiveness against crowd control, since we'll be able to easily clear through big groups of enemies as we jolt them full of lightning. And since Stasis Shards grant bonus melee energy, utilizing stasis weapons that come with Chill Clip would be able to add to our already impressive ability regeneration. When it comes to the armor that completes this build, the main character stat that we're going to focus on is going to be Resilience. Having this at 100 will provide us with a 30% reduction to incoming damage. Focusing towards recovery would also be beneficial to increase how quickly our health begins to come back on its own. Otherwise, I would recommend focusing towards strength so that we can reduce the base cooldown time of our melee energy. I mentioned before that we're going to be using mods that create orbs. This is why we're using a Helmet Siphon mod, the Heavy Handed mod, and Reaper. With all three mods creating orbs, we'll be able to maintain a Void Overshield, or Frost Armor. And with the armor charges that we'll have, we can take advantage of Melee Kickstart. This way, when we perform a Hammer Strike, we'll have instant ability energy restored. Now, if you're in need of having energy getting restored, then be sure to check out the amazing new supplement drinks like Sour Gummy Wormy, provided by Advanced GG, which are specially designed to help gamers keep on grinding through those late night hours. And by using my promotional code, you'll get yourself a nice discount on all those great products. But let's get back to this build. With 3 armor charges, we'll have an additional 34% energy coming right back to us, ensuring that we will always have our Hammer Strike ready to use. We're also using a few armor mods that will further enhance our melee and super regeneration. With Hands On, we'll gain bonus super energy whenever defeating enemies with our powered melee. And with Outreach and Invigoration, we'll be getting even more melee energy restored. The Peregrines promotes a much different and much more aggressive playstyle than a Consecration build. It requires a bit of a learning curve to be able to get the timing and movement down, but once you're able to get the rhythm going, this is one of the most destructive Prismatic Titan builds that's available right now. So if you haven't checked out the Peregrine Greaves on a Prismatic Titan, well, it's about damn time you do so, kid. And with that said, we've come to an end of today's amazing Prismatic Titan build, but I'd love to hear your thoughts about the Peregrines, Prismatic Titan, and the current state of Destiny. If you need help making a copy of today's build, then be sure to check out the Mobalytics link that's down in the description, where you'll find this and a ton of other great in-game builds. Thank you as always for checking out the video. If you enjoyed and found it helpful, then be sure to hit that like button below, along with the subscribe button if you're new. Both are greatly appreciated and both really do help support the channel. If you're a new Light Guardian, just starting your journey, or a battle-hardened veteran just looking for a new place to call home, then be sure to check out the Discord link that's also down in the description and join one of the greatest communities in all of Destiny. And until next time, Guardians, this has been Profane, wishing you all some happy hunting.